Okay, good morning everybody, Bore da pawb. I'm just going to read through our usual notices before we start the meeting proper. I would like to remind you all that this council meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so we are all on camera. Please be aware you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking, and please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. The meeting is available to view online now and in the future, whenever and wherever people wish to view it. Therefore, there is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. We welcome the use of Welsh language at meetings. However, I have had no requests today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. I'd like to welcome everybody attending the meeting today and anybody watching via the webcast. But please can I ask that all mobile phones and other devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic Car Park. And if we have any motions or amendments during the meeting, I will need them to be clear, preferably in writing, before we go to the vote. Okay, so thank you. We will now begin the agenda items. So item 1 is attendance. The register is going around the room. Item 2, apologies. Have we had any?
Yes, apologies have been received from Councillors Veronica Crick, Giles Davis, Mike Jeremiah and Richard Overton.
Thank you. Members, any other apologies that we know of? Oh, yeah.
I think Cathy Evans has sent her apologies.
Thank you. Okay, item 3, declarations of interest. May I ask Delith Harris, Monitoring Officer, to guide us?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any interests that need to be declared. Thank you.
Okay, members, are there any you wish to declare? If any come up during the meeting, please remember to write them in the register. Okay, item 4 is confirmation of the annual council minutes on page 5 of the agenda. So are there any issues for accuracy? If not, are we happy to approve those as a true record of the meeting? Yeah, thank you. Okay, item 5, confirmation of the minutes from the 14th of May from the full meeting. Any issues again for accuracy? No, are we all happy to approve those? Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm behind on the webcast a second. On item 6, updates on actions. Are there any issues anybody has around those updates? No, are we all happy to note them then? Yep, thank you. Item 7 on the page is receipt of petitions. We have had none today, so we'll move straight on to item 8, which is public question time. Again, we've had no public questions. Item 9, announcements from the leader. Leader, do you have any?
Thank you. A few things to announce today. First of all, just to thank members and everyone who turned up for the Armed Forces Week flag raising ceremony. Thank you for attending that one. On the 14th of July, there's the final homecoming of the second Mons to Pontypool at 2 p.m. on Sunday the 14th of July, and I believe members are welcome to attend that as well. Can I just first of all start by thanking Cwmbran Community Council and all those involved in putting on the big event earlier this month. It was a very successful event, and thank you to all of those who played a part in making it happen. On the same theme, World Heritage Day is coming up on the 29th of June in partnership with Blenavon Town Council and Party in the Park in Pontypool on Saturday the 13th of July. Alongside that weekend, the McMorris 10K on the 14th. So there's plenty of things going on across the coming month in Pontypool and Cwmbran and Blenavon as well. Can I just finish by saying a well done to the Friends of Pontypool Town for winning their Queen's Award. It's very rightful recognition of the good work they do, putting on events in the town of Pontypool and also helping out with things like regular litter picking as well. So can I thank them and Pontypool Community Council for that great partnership work.
Thank you, Leader. Chief Executive, do you have any announcement?
No, thank you, Madam Presiding Member.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 10, which is an award presentation for Torfaen Youth Service. So I think if you want to come down to the chamber and Mandy will present.
Can I just say while they're on their own, excuse the voice, Torfaen Youth Service achieved the Silver Quality Mark for Youth work in Wales back in November 2018 and were presented with the award at the Youth Work Conference in London in February. They achieved this for displaying a good standard of youth work in the following standards: involving young people, curriculum, equality and diversity, and workforce development. They had to submit a self-assessment and was inspected on the 6th and 7th of November and immediately told they would achieve the award. They now intend to submit a self-assessment in hope of achieving the gold quality mark. And I'd like to say congratulations and well done, and thank you for all the work you do, and wish you good luck with the award ceremony on Friday, where the new parent project has also been shortlisted for a national award.
Thank you very much. Item 11 will be another award presentation, this time to adult community learning. So if you want to come down, and I think Richard will read out.
Can I just offer congratulations to the adult community learning team for winning the Best Performing Local Authority Award at the Gwent ACL Partnership Awards, and my apologies for not being there actually on the night. I feel a little bit of a fraud because this was under Councillor Yowell's watch, so it should really be him taking the picture, but there we are, they're numbered with me. But I'd like to personally thank you for all your hard work and recognise this well-deserved award for all your efforts.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to item 12, which is appointment of a member to serve on the Foster panel. I think Nancy Selkirk will present the report for us.
Morning, members. This is just a very short report to seek an additional member to serve on Foster panel. Due to the increased frequency and volume of the Foster panel meetings, an additional member is required. Council is responsible for appointing members in agreed political balance, and the wishes of the relevant group have been consulted, and the recommendation is that Council appoints Councillor Rose Theobald as the additional member to serve on Foster panel. Okay, Leader.
I'd like to move that recommendation and also to thank Rose and Faye for the good work they do on the Foster panels. It's often work that goes on behind the scenes. By its necessity, it is quite confidential and sensitive work, but it is hard work for them, because I know Faye certainly, and I know Rose will too, takes great diligence in reading the notes and really giving the Foster panel the attention that it deserves. So thank you in advance, and I'd like to move that report.
Members, any other questions or comments on that one? Okay. Can I have a seconder then? Thank you. Okay. Can we have a show of hands? All those in favour? Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That's approved. We go on to item 13, which is the annual governance statement report, and it's going to be presented by Dennis Harris.
Thank you. The purpose of the report is to present the annual governance statement for 2018-19 to Council for approval. The statement outlines the processes and arrangements that have been operating within the authority in the last year. It has been prepared by officers in the Governance Review Group and is in the same format as the statement that was produced last year, but has been brought up to date. You will note that there are 7 core principles. I don't propose to go through each one. The statement sets out what processes are in place to comply with each one. The Council is responsible for reviewing the effectiveness of its governance framework, and the key elements of the review process are set out in paragraph 11.1 of the appendix. We have introduced for 2018-19 an assurance process from key officers with responsibility for certain functions and policies contained within the 7 principles of good governance, and all the relevant officers have given me a written assurance that the key policies and procedures are in place and working effectively. It is the opinion of Internal Audit that the governance arrangements continue to operate in an effective manner. The annual government statement has been considered by the Audit Committee and the leadership team. The recommendation is contained in paragraph 5.1 and Council is being asked to approve the annual governance statement which is contained in the appendix. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions or comments on this one? Okay, can I have somebody to move and second? Thank you. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour? Thank you. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Not, then that is approved. We move on to item 14, Statement of Accounts. Can I ask Nigel Aurelius to present the report for us?
Thank you, Presiding Member. Apologies that I'm presenting. Dave Lilly is unfortunately not well today. That's a shame because, as probably everyone knows, it's Dave's leadership that leads us to close the accounts early. We do have Suzanne here in his absence, and she leads much of the detailed work that gets us to this position. And we also have Julie from Grant Thornton. Once again, an early close down and audit. Cabinet considered the financial results on the 11th of June, an audit committee on the 12th of June, pension committee also considered it on the 10th of June. In respect of those charged with governance, it's the audit committee's role in this council to both scrutinise and challenge the statement of accounts and the subsequent audit report and satisfy themselves. They have done that in the meeting I've just referred to, and there were no issues that they wished to be raised with Council as a result, although there were a number of relatively minor issues that they, as an audit committee, intend to follow through. The report that you have briefly takes you through the process and where we are. I would highlight the statutory dates detailed in paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2. You will see not only are we well within the current timescales, but we're also well ahead of those for the future. I think those latter dates will present a challenge for some other authorities within Wales. Consideration and approval by Council is the final statutory step. You have attached to the report our accounts. They do seem to get longer and longer, not by any design on our part, but by a design on the regulators and our institutes. The pension fund report, 2 letters of representation, and the ISA 260 or the audit report for Torfaen. By reference to the latter document, you will see that no substantial issues have been raised, and indeed it's a very clean audit report, and the auditors do intend to issue an unqualified audit opinion. There's still some very relatively minor areas of audit testing that are being concluded, but nothing of significance and certainly nothing that prevents Council from approving the accounts and the recommendations within the report. The recs are there to approve the accounts, authorise the presiding member to sign the accounts and approve the letters of rep to be signed as required. In respect of the first recommendation, which is to approve the Torfaen accounts, I'd like the recommendation just slightly amended, so 4.1a should read, the authority's 2018-19 statement of accounts be approved and those of the pension fund for 2018-19. Following Council, the final stages of the audit testing will be concluded and the signed accounts and related documents will be submitted for formal sign-off by Anthony Barrett. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any comments or questions? Rob, did you want to speak? Oh, sorry. Okay. Leader? Oh, Kelly first.
Thank you. I just want to say, sorry, I keep turning from the mic. I think we're the first council to come at this stage of the process again for the last 4 or 5 years running. This is due to the effort of all those involved and the effectiveness of the financial systems and processes in place. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everybody involved for their hard work in completing this so promptly. Thanks.
Leader?
Yeah, and both as leader and as the sort of former cabinet member for this area, I would just like to echo those points really, and just to thank Dave Lilly, Suzanne, their team, and Nigel as well for the guidance they've taken through this, and also to Grant Thornton for the way they approached that. I think these phrases are very easily sort of taken for granted, things like early closing an audit, things like an unqualified opinion by the auditors, but they're not something we should take for granted. It's because of the hard work and the good management that they exhibit. So thank you from me.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, then can we have somebody to move and second those? Thank you. A show of hands and those in favour. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That is approved. We go on to item 15, which is the Welsh Language Monitoring Report 2019. I think Alan Vernon-Jones is going to present the report for us.
Good morning to you. I'm here to present the annual report on the Welsh language standards for the financial year 2018-19. There is a statutory requirement that we must publish the report on our corporate website by the 30th of June and make available in all of our offices. Before I just run briefly through the report, I'd just like to raise a few things that have happened in the past year and ongoing as well. There was a white paper on removing the post of the Welsh Language Commissioner some time ago and introducing a commission. This council and officers did give evidence in that for that white paper. But it was decided that the Commission would stay. So the last Welsh Language Commissioner, which was in post for 7 years, Mary Hughes, has now left the post, and we have a new Welsh Language Commissioner, Mr Aled Roberts, former AM and also former leader of Wrexham Council. The other thing that happened is that from that white paper is that the complaints procedure was brought into question on the length and the complexity of any complaints that were received through the Welsh Language Commissioner's office, which could take anything up to 6 months to resolve. But I think Mr Aled Roberts, from his short time in post from April, he's shown that his approach is more reasonable and proportionate in that respect, and some complaints haven't been upheld. The Cymraeg 2050, which is the million Welsh speakers by 2050, is gaining momentum, and that is feeding through to new legislation and new consultations going through with the new curriculum for 2022, where there will no longer be a Welsh second language in English schools, and it will be a Welsh qualification. And also there's the consultation on the WESP, the Welsh Education Strategic Plan, which is welcomed. So the 5 areas where we have to report on within with the annual report is service delivery, which is anything that's going out into the public domain, policy making, which is the impact on any decisions made by this council on the Welsh language, operational standards. Now they refer to the internal workings of the council, any training and any language skills of staff. Complaints, there were only 2 complaints received in the last financial year, and those both came from the Welsh Language Commissioner, through the Welsh Language Commissioner, by external bodies then. Those complaints related to correspondence received in Welsh, which weren't answered through the medium of Welsh. And the other one was to do with the Greater Gwent Pension Fund. We must report on the language skills of staff, and I think I'll raise that further on when I talk about what we'll be doing over the next 12 months regarding the Welsh language. And the recruitment is another area that we have to report on. As you can see from the report, there are 563 posts that were advertised in 18-19, and out of those only 4 were Welsh language essential. I'm not saying all posts have to be Welsh language essential, but we should be looking at assessing those posts as to the requirements. You know, there are 4 categories: essential, desirable, needs to be learnt, or not at all. And, you know, having someone apply for the post doesn't mean, without any Welsh language, doesn't mean they don't get the job. It means that we can then put the training in place for those members of staff. So I mentioned the Welsh language skills of staff, and that's something that we hope to take forward in the next 12 months, is work on the iTrent or IVA system that we have, and introducing modules which will enable us to record and maintain the Welsh language skills of staff. At the moment, it's kept on a standalone system which isn't updatable by staff, so the fluidity of changing skills as they go on training isn't done. As you can see from the report, we've had to proportionally change the number of staff with Welsh language skills based on the number of staff, total number of staff we have within the council. We also have to, you know, concentrate on the assessing of language skills of the workforce, new and vacant posts. As I said, there are 4 categories. I'm working with HR at the moment to introduce that, and you know, officers will be required to sign off what language skill is required for that post. We need to increase capacity. We know with schools, you know, through the WESP, through the new curriculum, will be producing far more Welsh language speakers, and the Cymraeg 2050 strategy of the Welsh Government requires us to give opportunities for children to use their Welsh outside of the school, and use it in the community. So, you know, and in the world of work as well. So, you know, we have a duty there to look at posts that require Welsh language skills. Some of the achievements that we've done over the last 12 months, the signage policy was amended slightly. We will no longer be translating existing signs on streets. That was following an announcement by the Welsh Language Commissioner, Mary Hughes, as it was then, that related to the Public Health Act of 1925, which doesn't require us to treat street names as signs under the standards. We did an audit of all websites and social media sites, and we found that some sites were defunct and not maintained, so they were removed. But we also noticed that some weren't being done bilingually, so we're working with those service areas to do that. Social media is an easy one for us as a council, because anything under 100 words we translate free of charge anyway for departments, so there's no financial burden on them. And the last one was working with service areas through our Welsh Language Coordination Group to spread the word and, you know, comply with the standards. We will concentrate in the next 12 months on the operational standards. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, let's start with Ronnie Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I look around this room today, and apart from yourself, Alan, are there any Welsh speakers in here that I know of? No. You said about jobs, when people apply for jobs, and if the Welsh media and language is part of the job, it would be considered, and you said didn't necessarily mean they wouldn't get the job. Well, I wouldn't hold on to that one, because I know people have gone for a job and because they didn't speak Welsh, they didn't practically get through an interview because the Welsh wasn't there. And when you say about jobs within the council, I don't know if you've got any stats on it. How many people actually ring up this council and want to speak to somebody in Welsh? You will know, so that's a question for you. And when you say about children in schools, and they go home and they speak the Welsh medium languages at home. I know lots of kids that go to the Welsh medium schools, and when they get home, not a word is spoken in Welsh, because none of the family speak Welsh. And I know one child was taken out of a Welsh school because of the stress on him, because he was going home. He said, "But I need to speak to you in Welsh." And it was to his grandmother, actually. She said, "But my love, we don't speak Welsh in this family, but I need to speak to you. I've got to go home and speak Welsh." And there was nobody to speak to him. They actually took him out to school in the end. So I have great reservations about the Welsh-speaking schools as well. When they leave school and they go to Gwyntlw, which is, we know what mess that's in at the moment, and they go to England, to universities, end of their Welsh language, because that doesn't have to apply at all in England. And that's where lots of people go, unless they go to university in Wales. And when they come to university in Wales, Welsh speakers, they all go to England. And I know a guy in England now, fluent Welsh speaker, doesn't speak to anybody in England. So I do have my reservations of some of the things you've been saying, especially when you were saying about training could be given if they would apply for the job. So you have to waste a couple more years getting them fluently speaking Welsh. So that's, again, waste of resources, isn't it?
Just to answer the question on Welsh language calls, you'll see in the report under the service delivery standards, I've categorised them into service areas. So telephone calls, there was 1.6% of calls were received through the medium of Welsh by Call Torfaen. So that's the statistic there. In terms of not saying that somebody won't get the job, unless that job is classified as Welsh essential, then, you know, there is the option and there is scope under the standards to provide basic Welsh language training to all staff, and there's a requirement under the standards. So, yes, they would be given the opportunity, and I would hope officers would reflect that when interviewing and when shortlisting, that, you know, that other skills as well as Welsh language would come into it. But if it's a desirable, it's not a case of them not getting the job because they haven't got any Welsh language skills.
Thank you, but I still don't believe that.
Stuart now.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Burnett has already asked my question, really, but thanks for the answer, Alan. I do share the concern of young pupils who are going home and being asked to speak Welsh in a household where no one else speaks Welsh, and I think that concern needs to be noted.
I'd just like to respond to that, if I may. There is the whole ethos now around schools is working independently, and it's good for children to go home, and parents can help their children through the medium of English, and that child then will transpose that into Welsh for their homework. So the argument of I can't help them with their homework doesn't stand really, because there is that individuality and that independence for children to work under their own steam.
Thank you for that, Alan. I appreciate what you were saying, but I've had instances where parents are coming to me and saying their children are getting frustrated and getting very anxious because of this reason.
I got Dave, then Janet, and then okay.
Yeah, I feel like you should step in at this point, because I think a lot of what's been asked of Alan is quite political in nature, and it's very difficult for him to answer it because he's obviously working within the confines. No. What I mean is the question originally from Councillor Burnett was obviously on the proportionality of how we address Welsh language standards in Torfaen, given the proportion of Welsh speakers in the borough, and whether we should be addressing it at all. I feel like I need to answer that rather than Alan. We do, because Welsh Government have a commitment to 1 million Welsh speakers. I think it's by 2050, and these standards are in line to meet that commitment. We're very much signed up to that commitment. However, we have recognised that there is an issue of proportionality in Torfaen, where we have a lower proportion of Welsh speakers than your average place in the north, like Powys or Ceredigion. And the Welsh Language Commission has been actually quite receptive to the arguments we've been making around proportionality. Again, I've thanked them before, but our team like Alan and Lyndon have been very, very good in kind of arguing that it be proportional for Torfaen, and thereby avoiding significant costs that might be incurred through some of the more sort of taxing standards. So it's all proportional. I understand the argument you're making, but we've got to commit. Welsh Government have got a commitment. We have to address that commitment, and we are doing so proportionally. So that's the political answer.
Thank you for that, David. On this note, I'm glad to hear the decision has been made that the street signage doesn't have to be duplicated bilingually, therefore saving this authority some considerable amount of money.
Janet.
Thanks, Chair. I have no problem with anybody learning Welsh, and I'm very proud that our children have. But recently, I watched the Year of the Steddfod taking part in Cardiff Bay. I was extremely disappointed that there was no representation from any Welsh medium school in Torfaen. Plenty from Ceredigion, Carmarthen, North Wales. And it really, if we're trying to promote Welsh in our schools, I would have liked to see representatives from Torfaen schools at that event.
Just quickly, I can't give you the reason why schools haven't taken part, obviously in the televised things, but I do know for certain, as a fact, that a lot of Gwynllywr children, for instance, won a lot of prizes in the arts and crafts within that Year of the Steddfod. And any of you that went down and went into the Assembly building would have seen those artwork.
Perhaps we can have an update on that. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Wyn? Don't want to. Leader?
Can I just thank Alan for his work, both in the council and in the wider community. I know he works hard on this issue, and it's appreciated. I think page 276 of our agendas sort of points to the challenge in areas of Wales like ours where we don't have a lot of Indigenous Welsh speakers. So even if we're well-intentioned, it makes it more of a struggle. I note the point that Alan made about how we can perhaps work to improve that, especially working with younger people who have more Welsh language skills, and maybe wonder whether the work that we're currently looking at on apprenticeships could be an opportunity to get that in and to help bring on some younger members of staff as well. I would point to the wider benefits of bilingualism as well. As a governor at Ysgol Panteg, I see the contribution that our young people make to Eisteddfod's both the Pontypridd Community Council one, where Ysgol Panteg and Gristowtown Primary came together to make a contribution. And I was at an event in Cardiff recently where a pupil from Gwynllywr won an award for the work they'd done on their scheme. So they're making a contribution both within Torfaen and beyond.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I note members' frustrations with this, but I think what you've done here is a good job of making sure the Council is compliant to the Assembly's laws that they flow down to us. I see the Council's hands are tied. We've just got to make sure that we meet the law as best we can. My question is in relation to the cost. What does it cost the Council to ensure compliance to this law, and have we approached the Assembly to try and regain some of those costs?
I don't know if I can answer the question on getting the Assembly's money from that, but in terms of a team, we have a team of translators that work for the authority. That obviously helps with consistency and reducing costs. And then there's also myself who works on the legislation side, and that go between the council and the commissioner, and like we've already mentioned, it is that proportionality and keeping the costs as low as we can. You know, maybe changing the way we work a little bit will help and alleviate some of those costs as well. But yes, you know, that's the team. Certainly, you know, we can give you that figure after this meeting. We'll email you that cost.
So I can help answer part of that question. I think it's a very, very fair question because, as you say, whatever our thoughts, that the main goal has to be compliance, because we don't want to be found out of compliance, because that can cost us money and reputational damage as well. Yes, we have made representations both on the cost issue and on something that Alan alluded to about proportionality and this preference that we certainly would have, and it's good to hear the Welsh Language Commission taking this route of working with us and not against us. You know, trying to help us to meet the standards and not just act as an enforcer of the standards, but to try and work with us to make sure that we can be compliant and we can advance the aims that they want to advance.
Yeah, I just wondered if we could take an action to come back to the council at the next meeting to confirm what the current cost of meeting the legislation is. I've heard the figure of 700,000 bandied about before, so I just wanted to get some.
Yeah, we'll get that sent round for everybody so we see that. Okay, I've got Stuart Ashley next.
I'd like to remind people that the previous council, which was, 3 years ago, we actually put it across resources scrutiny twice. It's on the record if you have a look. It needs updating, but Alan did, the current debate comes from the work that resources scrutiny did, and it was actually my first scrutiny, and it was baptism of fire, wasn't it, Alan? And there was a lot of law, and I remind members, certainly members over there, that it's actually the Welsh Act. It's the official language. It's one of the 2 official languages in the British Isles. And that was part of the settlement, and I think we actually do a pretty good job in Torfaen on actually providing, keeping the law. Everything in Parliament, let alone this council, actually has to be reported in Welsh, and the recommendations that Alan's put in here, I think is a very good job. I was reminded of that last time we scrutinised it. It's not easy, and it's sort of Welsh light in a way, because this area is not an area that speaks Welsh, whereas you're up to North Wales, and if you go to the Eisteddfod or you go to the Welsh show, you're reminded of the fact that. I think, you know, it's a difficulty getting people, and it's a difficulty. And the bit about our children was a part of what scrutiny recommended at that time. Maybe we need to look at it again, I don't know.
Tony?
Thank you, Chair. I'm surprised, Alan, that you couldn't put a price on what it cost when Councillor Connell just asked you. I mean, the last time I asked that question, it was over £800,000. So whether it's gone up now, I don't know, but I'm just surprised that nobody could answer Councillor Connell's question.
We'll get it sent round, like I said, after, so I think, you know, it's probably too much to ask off top someone's head, but we'll get it sent round later.
Yeah, but I'm surprised that nobody could answer that.
Alan, can I just ask, you said that departments can ask for translation, so I was talking about councillors. I know a lot of people use social media. Is that service available there as well? Because I know, I mean, I would want my grammar checked before I posted anything.
There isn't a requirement for members to post anything bilingually. It's only cabinet members in their line of work that they need to be posting things bilingually on social media. Yes, you know, that if any member wishes to access the Welsh Translation service, then they're more than welcome to email myself or go through the email address, which is WelshTranslation@Torfaen. Yeah.
Dave, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You've addressed one of my points, which is basically that I think it's worth remembering that the officers coming before us, they're not sort of directories, they haven't got all that information to hand. It will be an estimate as well, so it's a very difficult thing to quantify. I think the figures of 700,000 or 800,000, From memory, I think those were estimates if we were to meet the original set of standards. And this is the point I made earlier about Alan, and thanking Alan and Lyndon for working to make them proportional to Torvine, thereby saving us an awful lot of money. So I would highly doubt it would amount to that amount of money, but you know, it's an action now, and I'm sure Alan will come back and give that figure. But you know, health warning that it is an estimate, so it's a very difficult thing to quantify.
Okay, members, any more questions or comments on this one? Okay, if not, then can I have a mover and seconder for the report? Thank you. Can I have all those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That report has been approved. Okay, we're going on to item 16. Hopefully, yeah, 16. Ethics and Standards Annual Report will be presented by Catherine Peggington.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me this morning to present the report of the Ethics and Standards Committee. The last report was presented to Council in June 2018. In the last year, there have been two ordinary meetings of the committee, September 2018 and March 2019. The next scheduled meeting is in October and then approximately 6 months thereafter, although additional meetings are arranged as necessary, for example, if there is an urgent need to consider granting a dispensation. The Council has adopted a local resolution protocol which is intended to enable the resolution of matters relating to member conduct, particularly when one member complains about another, which would not normally fall within the remit of the Public Services Ombudsman in Wales. The committee dealt with one complaint against a member in the last year. The committee concluded that there was a basis for a complaint, but the Code of Conduct was not being breached and that no further action was required. The committee did not deal with any reports from the Public Services Ombudsman, which was pleasing to note. The All Wales Standards Committee conference took place on the 14th of September in Aberystwyth. The conference provided an opportunity to reinforce the importance of promoting and maintaining high standards of conduct and the connection between good conduct, good governance and excellent service delivery. The conference is usually attended by organisations from across the Welsh public sector, including representatives from every principal council in Wales, many community councils, the National Parks Authority and the Fire and Rescue Services. 3 members of the Ethics and Standards Committee and the Monitor Officer attended. Some of the topics covered were social media and bullying, standards hearing and sharing good practice, and the role of the Standards Committee. Those that attended found it useful and informative, meeting people from various organisations and hearing the Ombudsman speak of his role in Wales expanded and consolidated their knowledge of the work of the Ethics and Standards Committee. The Ombudsman has published an annual report for 2017-18, which includes a section of Code of Conduct complaints. The number of Code of Conduct complaints has increased to 270, an increase of 14% compared with 2016-17. The increase relates entirely to Code of Conduct complaints involving community councils, which have been increased by 33%. The Ombudsman has said that it is difficult to say exactly why there has been a significant rise in complaints about members of town and community councils. It's believed that many of the complaints have arisen following changes in membership of these councils, and difficulties have arisen between long-established and new members. As in previous years, the majority of complaints related to matters of promotion of equality and respect. These accounted for 42% of the complaints, 37% in 2016-17. Disclosure and registration of interest, 19%, and integrity, 16%. They were the second and third most common types of complaints, which is consistent with the previous years. Of the 247 complaints, the majority, 213, were disclosed as there was no prima facie evidence of a breach of the Code of Conduct, or it was not in the public interest to investigate. Of the cases investigated by the Ombudsman, 3 cases were referred to the adjudication panel. 2 of the cases were considered by the panel, and in both cases, serious breaches of the Code were found. Both cases involved councillors making derogatory remarks and unfounded allegations against staff and engaging in bullying, harassment, intimidation and malicious behaviour. As a result, the county councillor was disqualified from holding office for 14 months and the other county councillor for 18 months. We await the Ombudsman report for 2018-19, which will give us some more up-to-date information on the current position. The Ethics and Standards Committee would like to stress how important it is that members attend training sessions to keep up to date with any changes that might affect their role. The Ethics and Standards Committee attended training on the 11th of January 2019, along with representatives from Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire Council's Standards Committees. The training was delivered during the Civic Centre with the intention of refreshing, updating and reviewing the role of the Standards Committees, upholding high standards of conduct in public life. It was well attended and feedback was very positive. It's the first time a joint training of this sort has been undertaken locally. The Ethics and Standards Committee were provided with the updated sanctions guidance from the Adjudication Panel for Wales on the factors to take into account in considering appropriate sanctions against members who are found to be in breach of the Code of Conduct. The guidance describes the standards expected in public life and the mitigating and aggravating circumstances that a tribunal will consider. Advanced consideration of the sanctions in the broadest category will serve members and the committee well in dealing efficiently and effectively with the business before it. The committee wants members to be aware of the updated guidance so that the council maintains a high standard of behaviour and conduct. It is a living document and will be updated and revised as the need arises. The committee regularly considers applications for dispensations in respect to the personal interests which would otherwise be prejudicial and prevent a member from participating in decision-making. Most of these relate to members' small scheme donations. This year we've dealt with 35 of these. We're pleased to be able to consider dispensations which allow members who are particularly active in their ward through committee and club memberships to make these donations without infringing the code. However, we occasionally have felt the need to remind members that very large year-on-year donations to the same organisations need to be considered very carefully. The committee continues to receive and review reports on the level of attendance at meetings, seminars and training sessions as part of its role in promoting high standards and supporting members in their training and development regarding the code, always with the intention of helping members to perform their duties effectively and to aid public understanding of the demands and competing priorities members balance every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions or comments? Stuart?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Catherine, for that report, and thank you the committee as well for the work that they do. There's just one point I wanted to make, Catherine. And, have you given any thought about, and you referred to the 35 members that you had to give permission for. Have you given any thought to, certainly in my instance, I make a donation to an organisation that I'm perhaps a patron of or a committee member of, and there's historical information to back that up. Is there any need that we need to do it every time? I'm thinking of your workload as well, you know.
I could ask the Monitoring Officer to help me out of this.
I think that's something perhaps I'll have to consider, Councillor Stewart Evans, and perhaps have a conversation with you to consider the criteria, and perhaps we'll look into that and come back to you on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Chair. Thank you, Catherine, for the report. This summarises on an all-Wales basis. I was wondering whether we had specific information pertaining to Torfaen and whether the general picture, where you've seen an increase in a number of complaints from community councillors, has also been reflected in Torfaen. As members will be aware here that we have training sessions on Code of Conduct. Does that same training, or is there a similar degree of training for members of county councillors? Sorry, I beg your pardon, community councillors as well?
Perhaps if I can step in there as well. In terms of an increase in community councillors in Torfaen, I can check the actual report from the Ombudsman for you to see whether there is a specific provision regarding Torfaen, because off the top of my head I can't recall, but I'll check that for you. In terms of training for community councillors on the code, my understanding is that One Voice Wales have provided training for community councillors on the code of conduct. Okay.
Any more questions or comments on this one? Stuart?
As a point, somebody's got something on. As a point of information, Councillor Bevan, I went on the training 2 months ago. Councillors, we actually had it with One Voice Wales speak, and it was very helpful.
Okay.
With the Ombudsman.
Okay. Can we have somebody to move and second the report then? Thank you. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favour? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you, members. That report is noted. Thank you. Move on to item 17. This is nominations to outside bodies. In your update, Nancy Selkirk will present the report for us.
Hi, this is a report to notify of in-year changes to the outside body nominations. There are 6 changes altogether in the report. The first 4 are all really under the same category. They should have been picked up at the AGM, as the Deputy Leader's new portfolio of employment, skills and regeneration now includes planning. And so these outside bodies fit within that portfolio. They've previously been in the environment portfolio. The 5th change is Possible Regeneration Partnership, and Councillor Louise Shepherd has been replaced on that organisation by Councillor Gwyn Jenkins. And the last change to note is just slightly different. It's Welsh Joint Education Committee. They no longer have 1 representative per local authority. They're regional representatives now, and they're nominated by the WLJ. So this one just needs to come off the outside bodies completely, as it's no longer relevant to us. So, straightforward report, and the recommendation is that Council notes the outside body updates details in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's a general question, not with regards to these specific appointments, but it does cover nominations to outside bodies. I've recently been appointed to the Aneurin Bevan Health Board, CHC, and it was mentioned to me when I went along to their meeting that they expected Torfaen to appoint up to 3 representatives on that particular committee. I just wondered whether there should be consideration given to any other additional appointments.
I expect a leader will take note of that and have a look at it. Anyone else? I think he was moving. Okay, can we have somebody to move and second then? Cool. Can I have a show of hands then? All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Thank you. That's approved. Okay, we're on to item 18. Oh dear, I've gone too far now. 18. Political balance and committee membership. I think this is going to be presented by the leader.
Nope, Deputy.
Oh, Deputy Leader.
No worries. Unlike the previous report, in between council, as I learnt to my cost last year, members of scrutiny committees stay appointed until this council chooses otherwise. So the report has come to council. It can't be delegated in between and reported back. It has to come to full council. We are aware that we're in the situation where we have 4 independent members at the present moment that could rise or fall, and we are very conscious that under legislation they are restricted to what they are entitled to. This council has always, as long as I've been on this since 2004, accommodated independent members, back to the days of Mike Goff when I was on in 2004 being on committees, and they've all served on at least 2 committees. The Council has also showed its commitment when it created the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and made that open to all non-cabinet members, so it didn't matter if somebody was a Labour group member, independent group, whatever, all non-cabinet members were entitled to go. We've shown our commitment to involving all members in the scrutiny process, which holds at the end of the day the 8 of us sat on this bench at the moment to account. That's all well and good if anybody, independent, conservative, independent group wanted to be on additional committee. They couldn't do so until the next full council, as I've just explained. As such, in 5.4, we've listed a number of Labour members, one from each committee, who have volunteered to come off that committee to allow those places to be filled by non-Labour members. If this is not the case, in due course we would review that and possibly put other members back on there, subject to the wishes of this council. So, in a broad nutshell, that's the purpose of the report, to take those members off, to allow members of other groups, in particular the independent, the non-aligned independents, to have the opportunity to use their skills, life and work skills, to contribute to the functioning of council. I have had the opportunity to speak to one member of the independent group, sorry, not the independent group, see I fell into my own fatard there, one independent member yesterday who has been consistent in his approach that I don't think these were your words, Rob, but you shouldn't have crumbs from our table. They should be theirs as right. And I've explained the history of this council, how we've tried to do that. So accordingly, and on reflection of our conversation yesterday, I would like to, with council's consent, add a recommendation, which I will pass to the chair in a moment, and that would be recommendation 3, that council makes representation to the Welsh Government directly and through the Welsh Local Government Association to ask the Minister for Local Government to consider the representation of non-group members on council committees in future local government reforms. We are aware that there was a previous Green Paper by the former Minister. We are told that the current Minister is looking at a review of local government and a paper will follow. If members were happy to accept that recommendation, this council, and I think it's the collective and not just the Labour group, this council would make those representations both directly and through the Welsh Local Government, which obviously we have representation on, that the Minister considers that in the bill.
Okay, members, do we have any questions or comments on this first? Yeah.
Just a pedantic point. On the last page now, we need to add Rose Seaborn under fostering panel, just to be clear. We've agreed that previously in this meeting.
Just for a point of clarity, really, at 5.5 it says, after discussion within the majority party group, the following members will vacate their seats on the committees listed. And then over in 6.2 it says, under recommendations, Council encourages non-group members to seek appointment to vacant committee seats. What I'm really wanting clarity on is, have those seats, has notice been given that those seats are being vacated? Have resignations been submitted for those seats? Or are you awaiting those resignations on the outcome of any future discussions or this report being agreed?
Yeah. The cleanest, for want of a better expression, way to do it is for those people to resign. That is the purpose of this report. If my expression on there wasn't adequate, I apologise. This report is the resignation of those individuals. Those seats will be vacant, and members will have the opportunity, should they so wish to be on scrutiny committees, planning or licensing, to come forward for those. If indeed anybody has a burning ambition to apply now, nominations I'm sure can be accepted from the floor now or at a later stage. Otherwise, we would be in a position where, if these didn't go forward now, perhaps somebody would want to go on a committee and notify us in 2 weeks' time, and they wouldn't be able to go till the next full council committee, where the appropriate person would have to resign. So it's a cleaner that they all resign at this present moment, and it will be reviewed at a future date.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a statement, and I built some questions in the statement, if that's okay, because obviously there's quite a bit to go through here. In regard to political balancing committee membership, 2 years ago, despite being democratically elected to represent the ward of Upper Cwmbran as a sole non-group councillor, I was in the unfortunate position of not being afforded any committee positions on the council. Whilst recognising all political balance legislation, I was not happy with the fact that I could not actively take part in any committee meeting business. As a result of this, I approached the Democratic Services Department requesting further support to seek a way forward to allow all councillors equal rights and opportunities as the next, thereby enabling me to serve on council committees in the future. Although I was aware and understood that there was legislation in place that would in effect stop my request for council equal rights and opportunities taking place, I also knew that it was this legislation that needed to be changed in order to make the working practices of any council fairer and more open. As any legislative change would inevitably be a long and drawn-out one, and the fact that the council would not be able to make such changes on their own, I believe that through the support of the Welsh Local Government Association, if Torfaen County Borough Council were minded enough to evoke such changes, then in order to do so, they would need to make representation and undertake the talks with all of the unitary authorities across Wales. To date, I am unaware of such representation or talks taking place. However, in December 2017, as part of full council, members agreed to support a report which was both written and submitted by the interim monitoring and assistant chief legal officer on a number of minor points of the constitution, to include, as Councillor Clark said, all non-executive members were to be given the opportunity to attend future cross-cutting and resource overview and scrutiny committee meetings. Great, a breakthrough to some degree. As to the submitted report today, well, I am disappointed that, although it refers to me indirectly as one of the 4 non-group councillors, I was not consulted on its contents prior to the report coming to council today. In fact, I believe the only reason why this report has been brought before the council is because it suits the majority group to do so. Under point 5.4 of the report, although the leader rightly recognises that there are now 4 non-group councillors following strict legislation as non-group councillors, collectively we can only hold 4 committee positions on only 1 overview and scrutiny committee. Therefore, whilst adhering to legislation, being a non-group councillor has only increased the number of places on committees to other group councillors, which in turn has resulted in extra time commitment having to be made by other councillors who need to attend additional council committee meetings. Is this fair? What would happen, and this is one of the question, what would happen if the working practices of this council, if additional group councillors were to become non-group councillors. With this in mind, and to expedite any necessary change in legislation procedure, I hereby invite other councillors to indeed become non-group councillors. I have come to the conclusion, could I say that again? I have come to the conclusion that this report is just an alternative way for the majority group to gift their political balance committee responsibilities to other councillors without the majority group councillors taking ownership of their own responsibilities. If I were still the only non-group councillor on the council, would this report have come to council today? I say no. I don't believe it would have. It's only the fact that there's now 4 non-member councillors on the council that this report has come to council today. Finally, I ask all councillors listed under 5.5 not to resign from their respective committees until further discussions with non-group councillors have taken place and a satisfactory resolution to the issue of political balance and committee membership within the council has been resolved. I am making a recommendation that no decision is made today and the report is deferred until consultations and discussions have taken place with all non-group councillors. Remember, we are all democratically elected councillors. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Robert, and I did offer you my personal apologies last night, and I will put those on record. You should have been consulted. That was folly on my part, foolishly relying on previous conversations we've had, where you've rightly, quite adamantly put your position that you will not accept scrutiny positions as a gift. They should be, as you've just made in your last point, yours of a right. I've reflected on that. My apologies still stand publicly and privately, and that's why I put the recommendation 3 in there to actually progress your previous comments to Democratic Services, that this should be looked at by the Welsh Government. I am a little disappointed that you think it's a cynical ploy by the majority party. If it were a cynical ploy by the majority party, the report I would probably write would be to reduce the scrutiny committees to 8 people, 6 people, whatever, and that would reduce the burden, if we call it a burden. It's not for me because I'm a cabinet member, I don't sit on them, but that would decrease the burden of the majority party. So if we were being cynical, the report would be to reduce the numbers on scrutiny committee. I genuinely believe, and it was my intention to be fair, I did exclude you, and I apologise, but I did write to the other 3 non-independent members on the 23rd of May, advising this report was going to be written to Council, and if they had any recommendations they would like to make, they could inform us of that. I did put a time limit on that because councils have deadlines for report, but I did extend that and say that if they wish to nominate themselves at council or even beyond the council, any person can nominate themselves after this council, we would certainly listen to those nominations. Yes, you are democratically elected, but I do believe you also should share the burden, as I've already called it. Every single aligned or group member of all parties are on at least 2 committees, regulatory or scrutiny committees, and it's sharing the work of that, and again, I repeat, it's holding us as a cabinet to account. Now, I know many of you have asked questions, either past or present. I think all 4 of you have asked questions at this committee. That work, and the work you do as questions, could be done in committee and actually shaping. I think Councillor Slade at a recent highways, I think it was highways, the parking seminar Monday or last Monday, pointed out that he'd raised something about a van taking pictures of people on double yellow lines, etc., that he'd brought up in scrutiny that hadn't been considered. So I think all members have a value of life experience and work experience that they can bring to scrutiny, and I think that burden should be shared as a right, not crumbs, Rob, but as a right between all members. And if you accept the proposed recommendation, we will certainly use our best endeavours to make that a right and not crumbs.
Yeah, we're going to need, if you want to continue with the deferment, it'll have to be an amendment. So I'll just let you.
Could I ask for an adjournment in the first instance, because obviously recommendation 3 was quite a long recommendation, and basically because it was only said once, I believe that the council need to view the third recommendation and take a couple of minutes to agree whether or not it is the right recommendation to go forward. So could I ask for an adjournment, please?
Yeah, we'll have an adjournment for 10 minutes so we can all see the recommendations through and we can chat about anything else. Okay, so 10 minutes from now. We restarted. The Chief Executive is going to read out an amendment.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I've had the opportunity to have some conversations with the non-aligned independent members, and my understanding is that they wish to move an amendment to the recommendations which they've asked me to read out, and it is that this report be deferred to a future meeting of the Council so that further consideration can be given to incorporating alternative recommendations. I understand that's correct, so as long as there's a seconder for that, then we can debate the amendment before going to the report.
Okay, so questions and comments on the amendment. Richard?
I can't even say reluctantly. I cannot support the amendment. I think you're just delaying for another month the opportunity to get scrutiny up and running with all members paying an active contribution to that. The purpose again of this report was to free the spaces to allow people to come on. By deferring this, you're not going to have members in place till September. There's visioning going on. I think deferring it is just kicking it into the long grass. The substantive part of the report remains the same. members of the majority group have to come off to provide opportunities for others to come on. We have, as a majority group, shown reflection, which is the point of my recommendation 3, which I will propose after, if this motion is defeated. So I certainly can't be supporting this. There is no point to this amendment. It's just delaying. There was an opportunity from the AGM reiterated in the email of the 23rd of May. I appreciated that that was not communicated to Councillor Kemp. I do not see the point of this amendment and will not be supporting it.
Members, anybody else wish to speak on this? Hugh, and then...
Yes, thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Oh, sorry about that. I don't know where that came from. It was just for clarity, actually, about one of the points that Councillor Kemp made. In terms of this, he felt that this was being gifted rather than what was actually a statutory right, that he was entitled to be appointed to these particular committees. And I wanted to ask whether that was going to be reflected. Would there need to be changes in the Constitution, for example?
My understanding at the moment is that there's no need to change the Constitution following today's discussions.
It's that point that we're trying to address with our recommendation 3, that if the amendment's refused, we will bring.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've listened to Councillor Clark, and knowing that there's another full council prior to the summer recess, if you like, I think that would be ample time to basically undertake any further discussions with ourselves, etc. And knowing that recommendation 3, from my point of view, it needs to be addressed separately and not by the submitting of another report, to allow the recommendation 3 to basically to be carried out, if you like, and then to treat the report which has been brought to Council as a separate report, because the chances are is that if recommendations 1, 2 and 3 formed the same report today, the chances are that the non-member councillors would not be agreeing to it, which would be a shame, if you like, at the end of the day. So I ask, knowing that there's one more council before the recess, it can be done if, again, the council wishes it to be done. So all I ask is that the amendment which the Chief Officer has stated still stands.
I think we've got to move in a second, so we'll go to the vote on this amendment first. Right, so can I have a show of hands, all those in favour of the amendment? Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Okay, it's fallen. So now we're going to go back to the original recommendations, and I think Richard wants to add a third one. So if we do that now.
Chair, I'm not going to prolong it. It's just that in addition to the report, we had recommendation 3 as written and distributed to members.
Okay, so first can we... Oh, sorry, Liz.
Can we have a recorded vote on this vote, please?
Do you want a recorded just a sec, because we're going to have this added on and then the motion. So, okay. Yeah. So this is to add in recommendation 3. So can I have a show of hands? All those in favour of adding recommendation 3 in? Okay. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Okay. So now we're voting on the recommendations in the agenda plus recommendation 3. So you want to record in...
And we have a recorded vote.
Recorded vote? Yeah. Okay, so we've got enough people. Okay, just give us a second to have the forms. Okay then, members. Nigel and the Chief Executive will go through, and when it comes to your name, say for, against or abstain. Oh, Jacqueline's going to do it.
Councillor Stuart Ashley.
For.
Councillor Bevan.
For.
Councillor Burnett.
For.
Councillor Karen.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Constance. Veronica Crick is absent. Councillor Cross.
For.
Councillor Daniels.
For.
Giles Davis is absent. Cathy Evans is absent. Councillor Stephen Evans.
For.
Councillor Stuart Evans.
Against.
Councillor Gordon.
For.
Councillor Haynes.
Against.
Councillor Hawler.
For.
Councillor Hunt.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Jenkins.
For.
Councillor Jeremiah is absent. Councillor Alan Jones.
For.
Councillor Faye Jones.
For.
Councillor Janet Jones.
For.
Councillor Nicholas Jones.
Against.
Councillor Peter Jones.
For.
Councillor Robert Kemp.
Against.
Councillor Malson. Councillor Mills.
For.
Councillor O'Connell.
Against.
Councillor Overton is absent. Councillor Owen.
For.
Councillor Parish.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Preston.
For.
Councillor Rapier.
For.
Councillor Seaborn.
For.
Councillor Shepherd. Left. Councillor Slade.
Against.
Councillor Tew.
For.
Councillor Colette Thomas.
For.
Councillor Dave Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Waite.
For.
Councillor Williams. And Councillor Yowell.
For.
Okay, members, there were 7 against and 31 for, so that item has been approved. Okay, so we're moving on to agenda item 19, motions on notice. First, we've got one on the adoption of unadopted highways, and Hugh Bevan will present.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Officer. This was, by way of background, brought to my attention by residents in Breckford Close, in my ward. They've been campaigning for a long time to get that particular road there adopted. They've actually paid a considerable amount of money themselves to improve the condition of the road surface. They're in a funny situation in that they receive partial services from Torfaen. They get street lighting but don't get any of their drains unblocked. They asked me to escalate the matter up to the MP and the AM for this area, as they felt the responses that they were getting were not satisfactory from Torfaen Highways. We had a meeting with Torfaen Highways Department at David Davis's offices, and pursuant to that actually received the list of unadopted streets in Torfaen. This is not a parochial ward issue that I'm just bringing to the fore of all members. Members will have seen in the email I sent out yesterday that it covers quite a number of wards from Blaenavon in the north of the borough right down to my ward in the south. The wording of the motion is the council agrees to commence a programme to start works on the unadopted streets throughout the borough to bring them up to council standard to enable them to become adopted. The rationale, I understand from the Highways officers, that since we had the local government reorganisation back in 1996, Torfaen have not adopted any of those streets on the unadopted list. The only ones that have been adopted have been on new build estates and developments. The residents on these unadopted streets are having to pay themselves for road repairs and drainage issues, but they don't receive any partial rebate at all on their council tax. There's currently no provision for that. I would like to propose, therefore, that Torfaen commences a programme to start works on the streets throughout the borough to address this issue using the formal unadopted streets list that was provided by Highways officers. I believe, given the number of streets are involved, this is going to be over a period of time. I don't think that it would be possible for Council to address all 41 of those streets identified on the list. So it's obviously going to be an ongoing programme, but I believe it should commence immediately, subject to member approval today. In my email yesterday, with regards to the funding issue, I am initially proposing a one-off transfer of, I've suggested to members a figure of £250,000 to get the ball rolling, but with subsequent years' funding to come from the normal existing budget proposals, along with pursuing other avenues for external funding. The actual motion itself just mentions reserves, but I haven't obviously gone into further detail on that, but there was further detail in the email sent out to members for consideration that I sent yesterday. And then obviously finally I'll leave it up to the Council's Highways Officers team to determine the order in which the streets are adopted and the work commences to bring those roads up to council standards. Just as an FYI, the Highways officers mentioned that the two streets that would require the most extensive amount of works would cost in the region of £100,000 each to bring those up. Many other streets on that list would be less or even lower than that particular figure. So that's the motion for consideration for members, please.
Members, I'm opening up to debate. Any questions or comments? Bring Fiona first.
Thank you. Thank you, Hugh, for raising this issue. It is something that's been on my radar right from the get-go of holding this position. I think, though, that for members to be completely clear, you must understand how much it's going to potentially cost. It's likely to be higher, £2.88 million, to actually get these roads up to scratch. The other problem that we have is that the fact that the roads that we already have that are ours are adopted roads. They are our legal responsibility, and mine in particular, in that if we don't make sure that those roads are up to a certain standard and anybody has any instance on them, then I'm culpable for that, in that, I'm responsible. So it is really important, and I'm sure all members can look at roads that are adopted within their wards that aren't at the standards that they would like. The other thing to consider is this isn't a corporate priority, and I don't want to seem impassionate or uncaring, because I actually have an adopted road in my own ward, and I do very much care about the situation that those residents are experiencing. And yes, they might not receive all services from the council in a traditional sense. But again, another point to raise is that this is not a service charge. Council tax is not a service charge. If I don't have children or I don't need social care, that doesn't mean I get a rebate. You know, it is a charge that's put out so that everybody contributes, and we all hope to make our council better. As far as my points, I think I've made most of them. I do want to make the big thing, though, that I know from my own ward how difficult it's been for residents there. It's not that we don't care, and it's not that I haven't tried. I've looked at every other option that I possibly can. I've actually, I'm trying to arrange a meeting with the Minister so that I can have a conversation with him. There's some work within the Welsh Assembly as well in terms of the newer unadopted roads, but not necessarily historical ones. That's the other point that I wanted to bring in as well, that reminds me. That we actually have a policy already. I'm not sure if officers told you that, but there is a policy that was agreed by the previous exec member and then reaffirmed by that exec member many years later, that states that we will update the 2 worst affected roads when funds become available, but those funds have never been made available. So I'll leave it there and let others debate.
Okay, Ray first and then...
Thank you. Can I just commend my Conservative colleague for bringing this up, because it's not a ward particular issue, and I know over the years I have had a number of residents contact me who live on unadopted roads stating, you know, why should they pay the same amount of council tax as people who live on adopted road. And I take your point, Fiona, I do agree with you, but it just seems unfair that somebody who just happens to live on an unadopted road has to pay the same council tax as somebody who lives on an adopted road. And I can't see the argument. As long as this is phased in over a number of years, yeah, I completely support the motion.
Stuart?
It was great reluctance. Great reluctance. I can't support the motion, but I, as the presiding officer and my ward colleagues well know, we have 2 extremely bad roads in Pontywydd. One has had for the last 30 years, the people have been coming to our every other ward surgery, quite rightly so, because it's one of the worst roads in the borough. And the other road that we've got in our area has, when it rains like we've got now, tends to have ducks floating on it. So, and they are extremely exercised by it. So, I mean, the reason I can't support it is for the reason that Fiona stated. We've been after her and the predecessor, like they hate the sight of us, I suspect. So we're well aware of the issues, and I agree with what was stated in the sense that that amount of money is amazing. The issue is that we do need to get this onto the national agenda. And as for the issue, as far as we've had that discussion, and time again in Pontywydd, and it's about the issues of what service you do and don't get. You know, and I well understand why you put it there, and I think the issues. Any boroughs in Wales with these unadopted roads, they're an anachronism that should not exist. And as such, I unfortunately can't support it, but I do support the rights of residents to bring these issues to councillors, and we listen to it all the time I've been a borough councillor. And that issue and the issues around residents being able to get out of roads, etc., which we're exploring at the moment, is something we need to do, and certainly we need to be putting that in front of the Welsh ministers, and certainly we'll be doing that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I mean, as you just mentioned me, yes, obviously I have lots of sympathy with this. I won't be able to support it, I think, because of the commitment is a lot of money, but I certainly hope that during budget round we will be looking at to do something. Okay.
Yeah, I'd start with the personal interest, because I live with the unadopted road to the rear of me, so this very much affects me. But also by saying that I won't be supporting this motion. And even though we've got, we've got some of the worst unadopted roads in our wards, as Stuart's already covered and Jess has covered, I think this is a blunt instrument. I just think it's committing us to an awful lot of money. And our existing policy, in my view, is much better. And the argument that we've been making with Fiona is that Welsh Government should give us more money to be able to do this. And that's an argument we'll carry on making forward. I think that's the argument we need to be having, rather than arguing amongst ourselves for an increasingly scarce amount of money. So I absolutely get the arguments you're making, Hugh, and I absolutely sympathise with you on a personal level as well as on a councillor level, but I think personally this is a blunt instrument, and I hope you understand why I won't be supporting that today.
Okay, I got Rose, then the leader, and then Stuart Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome this debate because as a member of Fairwater and as anybody who knows Fairwater, when I moved into it, it ceased at Cumbrae High School. It's gone up and nearly touching Risca now, but there is still a number of roads that haven't been completed by developers. The developers have gone into the wards and they've actually produced the houses, sold the houses, had the commitment to keep upgrade and keep the roads that they have actually put in, and they're not fulfilling their commitment. So there's a number of roads in the Tyrconnell area that haven't been upgraded to a standard where the council could possibly adopt them, which is what we look for. And that is just not being done by a lot of developers. We've got a lot of development and infill going over the borough, and I'd like to see officers actually putting their efforts into making sure that these developers actually fulfil their rights.
Okay, leader.
Thank you, Chair. I very much understand the frustrations that's been expressed by many members today, especially over those that are ingrained historical issues that have been going on for a long time. But this is, at the end of the day, a matter of resources that are overstretched already to try and deal with the roads we have adopted, and there has been no allocation for this. I can pledge to do two things. One is to join arms in lobbying the Welsh Government to try and give us some resource that recognises the need to do this. I think the other is around the point that Rose just made quite rightly about the need to voice to developers the responsibilities that they have, that they can't make a profit out of a site and then not be seen months or years down the line. So those are 2 points that I think we can make. I would emphasise, as I would given my background, the fact that council tax can't be seen as a service charge. If you have lots of kids, we don't make you pay more council tax. If you need lots of social care services because you're unlucky enough to have a disability or something, then you don't have to pay more council tax either. And that's the sort of the matter of the fact there. Also, the point that's been made about reserves. We can't use our reserves for an issue of this magnitude. Otherwise, we'd end up in the situation of councils like Northamptonshire, who have been effectively declared bankrupt because of a lack of reserves to meet their ongoing requirements. So, again, whilst I express a sympathy and I understand the frustration of members, I can't support this motion because a blanket motion can't be the way to address this. But I'm more than happy to get involved as leader in any attempts that there can be to try and get into these issues and resolve them as much as we can.
Okay, I've got Stuart Evans next.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of the complaints I receive from my residents in my ward, where there are quite a few unadopted lanes, is about the very fact that they can't use them practically. And it's really relevant at this time as well, with enforcement being taken place, that people are able to access back lanes to take cars off the road. So I will be supporting the motion.
Right, Janet.
Thanks, Chair. I support this motion. I too have complaints from residents who live in unadopted roads, and they really feel that they're like second-class citizens because they don't have the services. So I wholeheartedly support this motion.
Nick.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Hugh, for bringing this. It is an important thing. I'd like to ask two questions. One of Fiona. We've got a total cost of 2.8 million. Maybe she could give us a breakdown of that on an individual roads basis. And the other thing that I want to ask is that we have also made a commitment as a council to bring the 2 worst roads up to standards when funds available. Now, I'm very, very conscious that obviously that in current times maybe money isn't available, but this has been an ongoing thing for huge historical situations. The money has been available in the past. We have chosen not to do anything about it in the past. But just dealing with the present, maybe it's unfair for us to identify 2 roads in particular that should be done. Maybe if we can't support this just at this moment in time, maybe we could have an undertaking that when the funds do be available, that we do all of them rather than just 2 of them, because that would be much fairer across the borough.
Thank you for your question. So first of all, a list is an approximation of how much it would cost, and I've got it as a bulk amount. I do have some breakdowns for the worst 2, and I should point out that the worst 2 in the borough are actually in Pontnewydd. So it is in the ward of Stuart, David and Jessica. And I've actually visited those roads, and they are awful. The other point that you're saying is that if we were to allocate to do them all at the same time, is that what you were getting at? No, sorry.
Sorry, Fiona, I wasn't suggesting that we do them all at the same time, but that we adopt a policy that when the money becomes available, we do all of them, rather than just to identify 2 in particular.
Right, I appreciate your point. So, again, for one, it's not our responsibility, but also to do that, it would be incredibly costly. You know, I've already said 2.88 million. That is an approximation that is likely to go up. This is not a corporate priority, and it sounds like I'm being completely uncaring when I say that, but we as councillors set what the corporate priorities are. We all take joint responsibility. And when something doesn't quite fit in the box that we want it to fit in, it's not acceptable then to just say, oh, I don't like this. You know, it is the responsibility that we've got. I know that I get complaints, and I know all of you get the same complaints from residents with adopted roads. And you'll know how challenging that is. We've had many debates about how to try and make sure those roads are kept to a standard that is appropriate and safe, but then still visually that some residents will complain because they look mottled. Although I would say that our roads are pretty good, especially compared to other authorities. So yes, it's pretty difficult then to actually be able to commit a fund of money. The other point I want to make, though, is that these roads, these unadopted roads that we're talking about, they're not 5 years ago, they're not 10 years ago. Some of these are 30, 40 or more years ago. These are like before I was even born in some cases. People that have moved onto these streets without being uncaring, they knew that these roads were unadopted. You know, we all need to take more responsibility for what we do and where we are. And I also know of streets where residents have actually paid for those repairs because they are fully aware that they own the road and they pay for them. So what am I supposed to say to those residents? Oh, well, you've paid for your repairs, but now we're going to pay for those people over there. That doesn't seem fair either. Do I give them a rebate as well? This is the difficulty that I'm in, and trust me, I've had sleepless nights over this particular problem because I know how emotional it is for people to be on streets where their roads aren't adopted and they're not receiving all the services they potentially should.
Yes, thank you for the response on that. I mean, we're trying not to make this an emotional. We're just trying to make it a fair thing. If we've already got a policy where two of the worst roads have already been accepted, then maybe we ought to be fair to the other people that are on that list. To put them in the same situation. They're only actually going to be done if the funds are available. Nobody's suggesting that we actually spend that money just now. But I would like to ask, in answer to that, you just said it's not our responsibility. So if we are suggesting it isn't our responsibility, who should we or the residents go to ask for these roads to be adopted if it isn't us as a council that's responsible for them in any shape or form?
It is down to the residents that if they were to get it up to a standard that was adoptable, then we could adopt them. That's as simple as that. But it's not our responsibility. And in every situation that we can, we do try and make sure that roads, when they are built to adoptable standards. But again, as Rose has pointed out, new developments haven't necessarily done that. So.
Well, thank you for that. I'm sure that the other 39 streets will be very pleased to know that there are 2 streets that have had a special treatment from the council then in that case.
That's not the case. No, that's not the case. They are the worst streets. It was deemed in 1997, I think it was, that they were the worst, that we would adopt this policy, and that the worst streets out of the 43 that I have on my list would be dealt with first. The worst streets. That seems the best way to do things, is that if the worst street was, but nonetheless, in all that time, no funds have been provided. So therefore, it doesn't really help anybody in the long term.
If I come in a sec, I know Hugh's indicated, but when, because you're you've brought the motion, when you speak it'll end the debate, so I'll bring you in at the end just to let you know. Okay, I've got Glyn next.
I'll be very quick, Chair. I'm probably the only member here who was on Gwent County Council prior to all of this issue. I represented at that time the ward that Hugh Bevan now represents, or part of. I represented all of that, but it was all the Lamram and all the Lamfret and all the Pontier. I was trying to get these roads uprated then. We are talking, I was elected in 1989, so just to add to the point that Fiona's making, these roads have been unadopted for a huge number of years. And, for us to try and come up with 2.88 million, and it's probably significantly more than that at this particular period of time, when Gwent County Council couldn't afford to do it in the 1980s, then it is a very big ask, and unfortunately I too will not be supporting the motion.
Ronnie Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will be supporting the motion because it's from one end of the borough to the other as we know, and there's some dreadful roads. But as Hugh has stated, but ongoing, we're looking for funds. If we can just get one done now and again, as long as we can get a start in there. So I will be supporting it, but I would just like to say, Councillor Cross, I'm very sorry you're losing sleep over all these roads. I would recommend you be very careful how much sleep you lose, because it can get very stressful, and we all know what happens when stress sets in. So I would just say be careful and look at the job. Do you need to lose all this sleep over it?
Dave Thomas.
Thanks for that. Yeah, I just like to say I won't be able to support this motion either. The council's obviously very scarce on money. I can't even get drop curbs done for disabled people within my ward. So I've got to look for alternative avenues of money for that. So for that reason alone, I can't support this motion.
Alan Slade.
Thank you. I referred to the executive member's earlier remarks where you said that you were aware that certain residents had paid for repairs to their street. Were those streets then subsequently adopted?
I can't tell you that at this point. I'm not aware. It was an informal conversation I was having with a councillor that recently has told me that they've done repairs in their own ward, but it's something I can look into by all means and get back to you.
Okay, any other questions, comments on this one before I bring you back in? Gwyn?
Yeah, I support the motion. I got a problem up in Lewis Terrace up in Pentywyn, and they approached me. I went through the contacts, got hold of Bronhaven, got hold of the council, and nobody said it, but they said it was unadopted. But there was a way into T. Kairos, which is an oldest pensioners complex, and I know a few of the residents have been and done it themselves. But my idea is I represent my ward, and I'm going to support this because I think the unadopted roads all over the borough should be adopted. One at a time, fair comment, and you're saying about the money and losing sleep over the money, but let's have a bit of common sense in here today and think you represent people, all of us in here represent residents who are got to pay to repair their unadopted roads. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Snatchwood Ward, I'm going to support this, and I think that there's places in Snatchwood Ward that need to be done, as there is all over the wards.
Okay, Hugh?
Yeah, thank you, Presiding Officer. First off, I'd like to disagree with the views expressed by the exec member where she said that if the works had been undertaken to the road to bring it up to an adoptable standard, that road would then be adopted. That is not the case in Breckford Close, where residents spent many thousands of pounds getting the road improved, and they even actually used the council's own contractors to undertake the works to ensure that it was brought up to that particular standard. They've been fobbed off for over 20 years with many excuses for why the council would not adopt that particular street. So it's not true to say that if the roads are improved, then they are adopted by the council. And I would ask her to provide evidence of that in terms of how many streets have been adopted by the council since 1996, since the local government reorganisation. With regards to the two so-called worst roads being in Pontynydd, when I had the original meeting with the highways officer, he advised me that there was a total of 31 roads that were on the unadopted list. When I asked him to then send me that list, that number had then increased to 42. I would ask the exec member where she got this figure of 2.88 million pounds from, because the figure that was mentioned at the original meeting was 1.5 million, so there's a significant disparity between there. As I tried to explain in my email yesterday, I have suggested a one-off transfer out of reserves of £250,000. And I've suggested that as a figure because I felt that that would, with the number of streets that we have to undertake, this is not going to be an immediate fix, this is going to be a year-on-year rolling programme. If it is 41, I don't know how many that the highways officers would be able to do in a year, whether it's 4 or 5 would be a realistic number. But I am not proposing a transfer out of reserves of £2.88 million. And I want to be perfectly clear about that. I am proposing a transfer of only £250,000. The rest to be found in future funding as part of the annual budget process, which I would envisage this whole process to conclude it would take, I don't know, 8 to 10 years, but I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. The highways officers would have to advise on that. We've just had a funding from the Welsh Government. We've just received £1 million, and Torfaen has been issuing press releases about this extra £1 million for public transport infrastructure and safe routes into schools. I would also like to say that members of today approved the annual report and accounts, and I can refer members to page 122 of the report that's published today, where members will note that during the last financial year we have seen an increase in reserves of £3.5 million. This issue about the funds haven't been available from the Welsh Government, I would like to know exactly what approaches have been made to the Welsh Government, because this is not something that's come in as a result of the recent financial austerity measures that this Council is so keen to mention. This is an ongoing issue since 1996, and clearly it has been neglected. I know it's not a priority now, but it never was a priority back then either. And when you say about services, the council tax is not a service charge. Well, it actually is, because part of it is directly attributable to services to the police, and part of it is directly attributable as a precept to the community councils. But I'm not going to get into the whole thing about the naming of whether it's a service charge or not. The fact is there's a basic inequity of service provision. They all pay the same council tax based on the banding of their houses, and the fact that they are living on an unadopted street, they do not receive the same level of service provision in spite of paying the full council tax level. So I just wish to conclude Because everyone's been getting hung up about this issue of cost. No, we can't do it because it's 2.88 million. What about the money that this council has signed off in terms of transfers out of the reserves for buying the British? What about transfers out of the reserves to cover the loss on the acquisition of computers? Recent transfers out of reserves that we've had to pay off redundancy to senior salaried members. So the point is, when it suits this council, the executive, it's okay for them to authorise transfers out of the reserves. When it doesn't suit them, when it's not deemed to be a priority, we get the argument, no, it's too much money to ask. And I'm not asking for 2.88 million in one hit. It's an ongoing programme over a number of years. The annual cost is likely to be in the region of about £250,000. Thank you.
I can get back to you on some of your points, but I still stand by what I've said, and I think we've all had a really robust debate, and that we should just move to whether pass or not.
Sorry, Fiona, I'm told we'll close the debate, so we'll have to stop there. Okay, so we're going to take the motion as written in the agenda.
Can I ask for a recorded vote, please?
So just to be clear, we go through names. For is, in favour of the motion. Against is, it will fall. Just to make sure, because sometimes they're worded funny.
Councillor Ashley.
Against.
Councillor Bevan.
For.
Councillor Burnett.
For.
Councillor Karen.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Constance.
Against.
Councillor Crick is absent. Councillor Cross.
Against.
Councillor Daniels.
Against.
Councillor Davis, absent. Councillor Cathy Evans, absent. Councillor Stephen Evans.
Against.
Councillor Stuart Evans.
For.
Councillor Gordon.
Against.
Councillor Haynes.
For.
Councillor Haller.
Against.
Councillor Hunt.
Against.
Councillor James.
Against.
Councillor Jenkins.
For.
Councillor Jeremiah. Councillor Alan Jones.
Against.
Councillor Faye Jones.
Against.
Councillor Janet Jones.
For.
Councillor Nicholas Jones.
For.
Councillor Peter Jones.
Against.
Councillor Roberts Kemp.
For.
Councillor Stu Malson.
Against.
Councillor Mills.
For.
Councillor O'Connell.
For.
Councillor Overton is absent. Councillor Owen.
Against.
Councillor Parish.
Against.
Councillor Powell.
Against.
Councillor Preston.
Against.
Councillor Rapier.
Against.
Councillor Seaborn.
Against.
Councillor Shepherd. Absent. Councillor Slade.
I'm for.
Councillor Tew.
For.
Councillor Colette Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Dave Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Waite.
Against.
Councillor Williams.
For.
And Councillor Yowell.
Against.
Okay, members, the final results were 13 for, 25 against, so the motion has fallen, okay? Okay, so now we have another motion. I'm going to ask Stuart Ashley to present.
Hello there. Right. The motion that I'm putting today is on climate emergencies. You might have seen in the press that most councils in Wales, from top to bottom, have actually declared climate emergency motions, and it's very topical at the moment that Welsh Government, National Government and most councils are declaring a climate emergency. Why climate emergency? Well, it's everything from David Attenborough, Blue Planet, to everything that there is. If you look around the discussion of the planet, right, etc., etc., it's been very well briefed over the last couple of years. We've had young people protesting about it. I am not going to go into all that because we had a long day today. I'll just read out the motion and you make your mind up, please, and leave it and debate afterwards. The motion is climate emergency. This council should consider the need to declare a climate emergency. This consideration should be undertaken by the Resource Cross-Cutting Scrutiny Committee to undertake a full and proper review of whether a declaration is needed that we are doing to mitigate a climate emergency, what we need to do and how to develop a meaningful, strategic and impactful action plan. On completion of the scrutiny review, to report back to Cabinet its findings and recommendation. And I'll do the rationale. I'm going to read through all this just so you can digest this. As many fellow councillors will be aware, there is an international social movement gaining momentum calling on public bodies to declare a climate emergency and make commitments to do more to tackle the most serious risk facing future generations. We only have to look at the news to see rivers and oceans filled with plastics and job losses, even in our region, as industry adapts to a new world and new low-carbon technologies, resulting in global industrial shifts of a like we haven't seen before. Welsh Government has set targets reducing emissions by 80% by 2030 with a 5-year carbon budgets. We must and need to participate in this agenda, as we need to know what we are doing now and we need to have a plan for the future. I am fully supportive of us making a declaration of a climate change emergency. However, I also want it to be meaningful, and I want it to be done in an inclusive, cross-cutting party fashion, and any output that we produce inform existing and future work programmes, strategies and potentially even budgets. I therefore propose that today Council adopt my motion that we review the need to declare a climate change emergency and task the Resources and Cross-Cutting Overall Scrutiny Committee, of which I chair, to undertake a full and proper review of what we are doing now, what we need to do, and then we can develop a meaningful, strategic, impactful action plan to determine the need for such an important declaration. I commend.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm up next debate. I've got Fiona first, then Liz.
Thank you. I want to commend Stuart for bringing such a thoughtful motion to Council. Many of you will know my green credentials and the fact that I am so passionate about what we need to do in terms of climate change, and always have been. But the motion that Stuart brings is balanced, and it'll give us ownership, which I think is really important, that members have ownership and understand the real issues. But also I think that we'll have some positive things that come out of this, if it is supported, in that you'll understand some of the good things that we're doing as well. So, like the solar farm, hopefully that will come forward, or other good projects across the borough. So yeah, thank you very much for raising this, Stuart. It's a really good motion, and I will be supporting it.
Liz. It's really for a point of accuracy, really. I don't know whether Councillor Ashley wants to amend his motion, but in May this year, the Resources and Cross-Cutting Scrutiny Committee was changed to the Cross-Cutting Resources and Business Overview Scrutiny Committee. I think so that the correctly named committee is, I'd suggest that maybe Councillor Ashley amends his own. That's the way I read it, sorry. Okay. I'm assuming that's an amendment then, yeah?
Oh, sorry, Stuart's happy to amend it to the proper name. Okay, I got Stuart Evans next, and then Hugh.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to endorse this motion of Stuart's. I think this is a very good motion, especially in the light of, I don't know, any of the members been watching the TV War on Waste recently, where some authorities not too far away from us have exported waste to Malaysia. So, I mean, I'm happy to support this, and I think it's much needed.
Okay, Hugh.
Yes, thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm happy to support this motion. I welcome Stuart bringing it. I too have been onto the exec member on green issues as well, and I'd like to thank Stuart for welcoming cross-party inclusive fashion that he mentions in the report. I'm sure there are a number of members, not just myself, but from all parties, would like to have input into this. I think, should this motion be adopted today, it needs to be implemented across a number of areas within the Council. I don't want this motion just to be a lip service. You know, yes, we've declared a climate crisis. This is an issue that affects all of us, our children, grandchildren, all future generations. The United Nations have recently published a report about climate change and the impact that is predicting, even with current measures that we're undertaking, there will still be a 3-degree rise in temperature by 2050. 3 degrees doesn't sound a huge amount, but when you're going to get melting of polar ice caps, sea level rising, we've already seen a huge increase in global adverse weather conditions. We've had increased flooding in this country. You've only got to look over the events of the last few days. For this to be adopted by this Council and for this to work, it needs to translate into having a real and material impact on issues like planning, development, land usage, what we're going to do to address the reduction in the number of trees in the borough. As we know, trees absorb carbon dioxide. So I fully support this, and I do hope that this will be given the teeth that this warrants, and not just be done as a lip service.
Thank you. Alan?
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to vote for this motion, to be honest, because I think it's just a proposal for another talking shop. Every man and his dog seems to be adopting the climate change emergency, so I don't see why we just don't go straight to that and declare the emergency. I think the argument is pretty self-conclusive, to be honest, so I'm not sure why we need to discuss it further. I'm sorry, you know, that's just my feeling. I think we just get on with it.
Fiona, did you want to come in on that? Thank you. The reason I commended Stuart is the way that the motion has been written. Other councils, and I'm not criticising them, have just declared it. Whereas what we're saying is it goes to scrutiny, members own it, and we debate it and discuss it. It's not a talking shop. All I am is action. It doesn't. But that means, if I can bring in the leader, I think he's got some rationale.
The debate isn't about whether there's an emergency. The debate is about what we do about it, isn't it? And that's what we're trying to do, something meaningful, and not just declare a climate emergency and then not do anything about it. The debate is what we then do as a council to respond to it.
Okay, Jason?
I think leaders more or less taking the words out of my mouth. What is it that we're going to actually change as a result of this motion going forward? I don't feel as if we've got an answer to that yet.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm in agreement with the motion, but as Councillor Slade said, we know that the whole world is in an emergency. I don't think we have to debate it, but what we have to do is find out what we're going to do about it. It is an emergency. I watched a programme the other day, and I'm into recycling everything I can. And in other countries, I'm old Trumpy, don't believe there's global warming, do we? They're the biggest polluters in the world with other countries. And this country, I know we try our best, this borough does. And the programme is on television. Other countries, actually, their lorries tipping it into rivers that go out to sea. And I watch all the natural history programmes. everything dying in the sea, but this is other countries as well. We have an emergency. I think, as a borough, we're doing what we can, but again, it's another plan of how we're going to manage it, because it is an emergency, we know that.
Leader?
If I just refer back to to emphasise what I said, and I think Councillor O'Connell makes a good point. Ask the committee to undertake a full and proper review of one, whether a declaration is needed. I think there's agreement on that. 2, what we are doing now to mitigate it, and 3, what we need to do to develop a meaningful, strategic and impactful action plan. That's why I support this. It's not just saying there is one and so what. It's saying, look, if we think there is one, and I think there's agreement in the room that there is, what practical steps do we need to do? And those things won't all be motherhood and apple pie. We had a debate in scrutiny a while back, for example, about the use of weed killer. Now, there's an argument against using that on environmental grounds and on health grounds. Of course, if you stop using it, there's also a consequence in terms of service delivery, because there would be more weeds. And it's that kind of debate that we need to have, I think, very openly. And I think the scrutiny committee is a practical means of doing that, and not just us speaking out of council today and then there being a yawning sort of silence beyond. It's a way of actually practically doing something about it, and that's why I commend this motion.
Okay, Dave Thomas.
Thank you. I'm not really sure at this present moment in time which way I am going to vote for this motion, because I don't believe that we can really get serious enough on this issue when we can't even get our own house in order. I mean, we've got a failing education system. Our frontline services that are absolutely essential to our residents in some areas are, in my opinion, in need of a complete revamp. And I think we should really be ensuring that we are functioning properly as a council for the good of all of Torfaen before we decide to try and feel good about ourselves by declaring a climate change emergency in Torfaen. I just think it's a tick-box exercise that won't benefit our residents and, least of all, make any real difference to our planet.
Anybody else? Questions or comments before Stuart comes back in to sum up? Hugh?
I disagree. I've attended a speech someone gave on the impact of the UK was having on climate change globally. And they're saying that, you know, we're a very small contributor to the net global effect. And I do take on board that point. The worst offenders are China, India and the US, obviously burning a lot of fossil fuels. But I do also think we can lead by example. It's like a piece of litter. One person saying, my little piece of litter won't do any harm, and they chuck it on the floor. And before you know it, you've got a mountain of litter. So I do feel we have to take action. I think we can lead by example. What I would like to have seen, though, was this motion going further, not just tasking a review to an oversight and scrutiny function. I would have liked to have seen us declare the climate crisis, and I would have liked to have seen officers undertake work that they can to bring to that particular scrutiny committee meeting, because it needs to be, I think, officer driven.
Yeah.
Officers are already working at this, to be assured. Stuart and I have been talking to try and find out what we could do and make substantial differences. So there is work in the background to reassure you.
Okay,
so if that's the case, Madam Presiding Officer, shouldn't the motion be amended to reflect that?
Well, we can amend, but obviously I'll have to have somebody propose it, write it, second it, etc. So we can amend it, but...
Say, before you suggest anything...
Hang on now, because if you speak, we will finish. So, Liz wants to come in, Fiona wants to come back in, so let's have Liz first.
I do think an amendment is in order, if somebody would quickly like to write one. I will support an amended motion because I do appreciate the thought and the idea of us getting very involved in addressing this. I'm very concerned that we're not going to have both the manpower and the funds to do anything significant to address climate change on a local level, but I do think that we should be trying. I agree with you really that this motion should be that we are declaring a climate emergency, and that moving forward we are, and the rest of Stuart's motion can be worded in the way to reflect that. So I think we should today be declaring a climate emergency, and that it's referred to the relevant committee.
Fiona? Thank you. I'm satisfied that the motion is fine as it is. The reason that I support it is because it puts it in the hands of scrutiny. So scrutiny members will have the knowledge, the officer knowledge, and then can make an informed decision based on that. So it's not a reactive or a showy kind of thing to do. It's a very measured, and it gives a process. So if we accept the motion as it is, which is what I intend to do, then I would be happy with that.
Yeah, all right, I'll move an amendment. So what I'm hearing from pretty much everybody around the chamber is that we want to declare it a climate emergency now, but attach some action to it and make sure that it's not a meaningless, symbolic thing. I think we can do that without changing the spirit of the motion. So I'm going to propose that this council declares a climate emergency, and then we delete everything, the rest of that sentence. This council tasks the Resources and Cross-Cutting Scrutiny Committee to undertake a full and proper review. Then you delete of whether a declaration is needed, because I think we've declared it, of what we are doing now to mitigate a climate emergency, what we need to do to develop a meaningful, strategic and impactful action plan, and on the completion of the scrutiny review to report back to Cabinet with its findings and recommendations. Is everyone happy with that?
Yes. Second that.
What we're going to do, June, for 5 minutes to get that in writing. Make sure it's all set out.
Yeah. I think we're all happy with that.
If you're all happy with it, okay. Sorry.
It does need to be submitted in writing as per the Constitution.
I agree with Councillor Hayes, and also we need to forgive me, Councillor Bevan. Can I speak?
Quiet a minute.
we will need a clarity about what the amendment says, because you are then agreeing to that as a council, and it will go into the minutes and become a decision. So we do need clarity about what it says. It'll only take 5 minutes.
Okay, so I do it for 5 minutes, so it's perfect time to go get a drink or... Okay, members, if we could start thinking about taking our seats, we'll be starting in a minute. Okay, members, I've restarted the webcast, just so you're all aware. The Chief Executive is going to read out the amended motion for us.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Just to be clear, it's Councillor Daniel's amendment, so that needs to be seconded. If everybody agrees the amendment, which seems likely from the debate, then that becomes a substantive amendment, which Councillor Ashley will then close the debate on, unless anybody else wants to speak on it. So it's a bit complicated, but we've got it in writing now, so I shall read it out, and I hope I get it right. So it's in two parts now. So part one of the motion is, this council declares a climate emergency. And then part two is, this council tasks, and I have amended the wording of the name of the scrutiny committee in response to Councillor Haynes' point. So this council tasks cross-cutting resources and business overview and scrutiny committee to undertake a full and proper review of the measures we're currently taking in respect of what we are doing now to mitigate a climate emergency, what we need to do, and to develop a meaningful, strategic and impactful plan on completion of the scrutiny report to report back to Cabinet with its findings and recommendations. So that's the amendment that Councillor Daniels is proposing. So I think you need a second there.
Okay, so if we have a show of hands, all those in favour of that amendment. Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Brilliant. Okay, so that's now substantive, so I'm going to ask... actually, before Stuart comes in, does anybody else wish to speak now? Okay. Stuart, you're going to sum up.
Well, thank you very much for that amendment, because I think it makes it stronger, to be quite honest. And all I was saying was the idea, I worked very much with the people in Rachel's team, as you would imagine, putting this together, because it had a gestation period, this did. It wasn't just something that happened. And it was Dave as well. Between us, we put it into the system. And I would also like to thank the Brecon Beacons, because I was up there for a while, and I had quite a lot of conversations with people up there. And the whole business, as certain members over here said, about this being meaningful and not a statement shoved on the shelf, is important. We can make a hell of a difference in this little borough. I was exercising Schumacher. Remember? Think global, act local. Well-known expression from the 1970s, I think. I love that expression. Go and look it up. And it's the whole basis of modern environmentalism, which is you can make a difference even if you pick a bit of plastic up. Dave over here is good at that. And the point is a little bit done, and that's the point, the localism that we do as borough councillors, and I think that's important with this scrutiny. You all need to come along if you can on this one and put your ideas in, because that is what all the local councils in Wales, and I think the Welsh Government's got the idea, I hope they have, because without it, 10 years, 20 years' time, we are stuffed if we don't do this one. It's serious, and it's lots and lots of efforts building up. I love Carol Jacob on this as well, by the way, because she's really passionate, and lots of local people, old or young. Listen to those young people. They're brilliant. I love them. They're saying it's their world. It is. My grandson, Jess's daughter, people like that. You know it's their world, and we've got to put a better place for them. I am really passionate about that. Fiona uses the word passionate. I do when it comes to this one. We really need to wear a good world. The well-being of future generations means something. Thank you for this. I'll move it now, Jess. Thank you.
Can I have somebody to second that? Brilliant. Right, okay, let's have a show of hands then. All those in favour of the motion. Thank you. Against? Any abstentions? Brilliant, that motion has been agreed. Thank you. Okay, so we're moving on to agenda item 20, members' question time. So we've got quite a few today, so we'll rattle through. I think I've got Dave Thomas first.
Thank you very much for that. The Okay. The British was recently in the news due to the council having to spend £30,000 from its revenue budget to clear it up after a fly tipping incident. Can the executive member remind council members how much the British project is going to cost the hard-working taxpayers at Torfaen?
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. The British sits within my portfolio, but fly tipping sits within Councillor Cross's portfolio, so I'll do a little bit of a two-for-one here. Councillor Giles Davis has spoken to me in relation to the site, and I'm sure all local and surrounding members will agree that this site is a blight on the local landscape and a potential danger to the public and animals. Accordingly, the Council has for numerous years sought to bring the British into public ownership and undertake the remedial work that private industry morally should have but would not do. The remediation of this site and the area will be of benefit to locals and people further afield to enjoy and benefit from. In terms of cost, this was always out of the reach of the Council. When Councillor Gwynaira Clark was on the Council and Anthony was Resources, they met with HSBC, who then owned the site, and they were offered to take it off their hands for £5 to £7 million. Well, that was clearly absurd and unapproachable. In the end, it cost us £300,000, which was funded between both ourselves and the Welsh Government. In relation to the remediation, and I think you already have these figures because I think Councillor Slade did a Freedom of Information that you were copied into, so I believe you've got these, but for public record, the overall funding package as profiled is for an expenditure of £3.7 million, including the purchase price, of which £1.7 million has come from the Welsh Government, which includes, I've said that, the purchase price, and the remainder from the Council. This was approved in October 2016. Up to £2 million will come from the Council's capital programme. There is no revenue budget for the British. All works associated with its master planning, as per the Cabinet report of the 20th of November 2018, are covered from the capital I referred to. For the avoidance of doubt and for public awareness, and I think officers have advised you of this as well, the cost of fly tipping is covered from another budget and not the expenditure of the British. And this was so costly because the recent incident was hazardous waste, and we had to bring qualified and licensed practitioners in to remove it, and therefore we had no choice, because it was on our land, to incur these costs. The cost of fly tipping clearance is therefore irrelevant from the overall cost of the British programme, and the Council, which the Council endorsed nearly 3 years ago. I hope that deals with your points.
Okay, Dave, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do have a supplementary. So the British was advertised with a guide price of £250,000, yet the Council paid £300,000. Given that this site has been derelict for decades, why did the Labour executive wait until the middle of this period of austerity before deciding that it was a good idea to buy it?
You choose the figure of 250,000. I've already told you there was a figure of 5 to 7 million. So in terms of value for money, that's one occasion. There are periods of time that the Council have looked to purchase that. It has been various prices. I'm just telling you that, and I'm not disputing that, and the price we paid is the price we paid, and it's public. I've already been quite clear about that. I go back to what local members have said. It's the largest derelict site in Wales. It is a blight on the landscape. It is something that industry should have taken care of. It is right and proper that the public sector come in and stop the danger that there is to the public and animals, and rightly for the people of the area and the wider borough to finally put right what should have been put right a long time ago. It's been the ambition of this Council for a long while. We had the opportunity in our hands, we've grasped it, and it will only be for the betterment of the area and the borough as a whole.
Okay, I've got Alan Slade next.
Thanks. Ahead of the Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of July to look at the budget, I've been looking at the amount spent on services by all the other authorities in Wales. The figures on the Stats Wales website illustrates that Torfaen spends £2.8 million on further education and training for young adults, excluding youth service. Now, amazingly, £2.8 million is just £100,000 less than Newport City Council, Cardiff City Council, Swansea City Council and Wrexham County Borough Council combined. It should also be noted that the Council has no legal obligation to provide this service at all. It's a discretionary service. So my question is simple. Why are we spending such a disproportionate amount of taxpayers' money on a service that we don't legally have to provide? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Alan. The information on the Stats Wales website is derived from information provided by councils on what are known as revenue outturn forms. Whilst there is a desire that these are consistently filled in, all authorities will account for things in slightly different ways, and so any comparison should be made bearing that in mind. In relation to your specific question, the 2.8 million is a gross figure. After you take off grant income, the net cost falls to 1.1 million. The grant income is significant because we would be unaware of the level of grant income, if any, that would have been received by the comparator authorities. For example, at least 3 authorities would not qualify for ESF funding, which contributes to a lot of our training programmes. The picture is further complicated by the allocation of support costs, and authorities will record these in different ways. In relation to the last part of the question, the authority has never allocated resources based upon a statutory or discretionary split, or based upon what we legally have to do. Any number of discretionary services are highly valued by residents within our communities. Prioritisation is therefore based upon our corporate plan priorities as agreed by this Council.
Okay, do you have a supplementary question?
Well, first of all, I have a comment to make about your answer.
It's got to be framed as a question, sorry.
Okay. The Chief Statistician at Stats Wales explained to me that basically the answer is the data comparable? The answer is yes. It's because it's been provided according to consistent definitions and standards from each of the local authorities, and therefore it is appropriate to compare data from different authorities. But my supplementary question is this. Given that we are spending so much and during this period of austerity that we have constantly we're being told, how are you measuring whether, what our success is? What does success look like? What are our taxpayers getting for this 2.8 million than all the other authorities in Wales are missing out on?
I'll need to write to you on that. I'll need to speak, obviously, to other members and come back to you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Robert Kemp next.
Thank you, Chair. As part of full Council's members' questions held in March 2019, I asked Councillor Yole, in his capacity of Executive Member for Education and Lifelong Learning, whether he would be taking sole or joint responsibility for the outcomes of the predicted GCSE results for 2018-19. Disappointedly, Councillor Yole believed that, as all sorts of things could hang in the balance, he would not hold himself hostage to fortune by giving me a straight yes or no answer. With this in mind, as Councillor Yole could not give me a definitive answer to my submitted question, I would appreciate if, as Leader of the Council, you would give a response to the following question. Should the Executive Member for Education and Lifelong Learning take sole or joint responsibility for the predicted GCSE results for 2018-19?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Kemp. We should all take joint responsibility for raising educational attainment. Raising attainment is a joint effort involving pupils, teachers, support staff, school leaders, governors, councillors, Eston, the Gwent Educational Achievement Service and Welsh Government. We all have a vital part to play. We've tried in this Council to prioritise school funding wherever possible and to dedicate our energies to improving standards and results, as has been recognised. All members can take an active role in this, both in the Chamber, in scrutiny sessions and as governors in local schools.
A supplementary question.
I do, Chair. Should Councillor Yole, indeed all of the Executive Members, be accountable for the area in which they are responsible for?
We're all accountable, yes, both for successes and for shortcomings in our areas. I wouldn't seek to avoid that. Councillor Yole certainly got broad enough shoulders never to seek to avoid that as well. But there's the question of whether we just sit on the sidelines firing stones in, or whether we try and get involved and contribute to help improving things. Certainly there's been a number of characterisations in today's council chamber about our education service that just aren't borne out by the statistics if you look across the whole of our school system.
Okay, Councillor Kemp, another question.
Thank you, Chair, again. As the failed Estyn inspected Welsh Medium Comprehensive School, Ysgol Gwynllw, not only serves pupils from Torfaen, but our neighbouring Monmouthshire and Blaenau Gwent authorities, what response has Torfaen County Borough Council received from these authorities in light of the Damn Estyn report?
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Again, you're absolutely right. Ysgol Gyffin Gwynllw has been placed in the Estyn category of requiring special measures. However, together with the EAS and other local authorities in the region, we devised a policy and intervention framework for schools causing concern that's been in place for some significant time. This means that our partners have been kept closely informed of our work with the school over time and will continue to be kept informed as the school develops its post-inspection action plan and we complete our local authority statement of action. Apart from this, we've not had a separate or formal response from either Blaenau Gwent or Monmouthshire. However, the Chief Officer has discussed the matter with his fellow directors through the standing agenda item at their forum, and I've discussed the matter at JEG as well as at exec member level with the Monmouthshire exec member and Blaenau Gwent exec member. All concerned are supportive of the action we have taken thus far, and we will continue to take that action.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do, Chair. What part will both Monmouthshire and Blaenau Gwent authorities play or have in regard to bringing a Welsh Medium Comprehensive School up to the necessary Estyn standards? What part will they play? Yep, no problem. What part will both Monmouthshire and Blaenau Gwent authorities have in regard to bringing our Welsh Medium Comprehensive School up to the necessary Estyn standard? What part will they play?
Well, as I've explained in the substantive answer, there is a well-used format within both the SUC, which is the Directors' Forum, and JEG, that we've agreed on and has been in place, as I've already said, for quite a few years now, that every school giving cause for concern is on our cause for concern register, and it is a standing agenda item at both the Directors' Forum and JEG, and these are discussed quite thoroughly, and no holds barred are on the table. Everybody has a contribution, and although Ysgol Gwynllw is in Trefethin in our remit, essentially because there are pupils coming from Monmouthshire and Ebbw to that school, it is quite right that both Monmouthshire and Ebbw, or rather Monmouthshire and Blaenau Gwent, have an input into that debate.
Okay, Councillor Kent, another question.
Yes, Chair. Members who recently attended the seminars Civil Parking and Environmental Enforcement were duly informed that they would not be allowed to accompany any of the newly appointed enforcement officers as part of their ward walkabouts. What is the reasoning for this?
Thank you for your question. I've always been keen to involve members in the creation and implementation of our new enforcement service, which includes both civil parking and environmental enforcement. And we've gone to scrutiny, and of course there was the recent seminar that you're pointing out where this was discussed. At the seminar, the ways in which members could be involved were discussed, and we noted that members had concerns or hotspots areas. They were aware they could raise those issues with officers via the normal processes. Additionally, the quarterly street scene meetings will be expanded to include the topic of enforcement. So members are fully able to ensure that their issues are highlighted. I appreciate members may like to accompany enforcement officers, But, as again in the seminar it was pointed out, I must guard against any suggestion that members having any undue influence in the work on that basis, and given the ways in which members can engage with the service, it's not considered appropriate that members accompany enforcement officers during the normal duties. You've all received an email during the week pointing out that you're not allowed to influence in any way. So that is the reasoning, and it's actually put within, in particular, the civil enforcement procedures.
Okay, do you have a supplementary question?
I do, Chair. Over many years, without incidents, I have undertaken community street walkabouts and held on-site meetings with community partners to include the community policing team and area managers from Bronavon Housing Association. And we've had discussions which have not been influential, but positive regarding the discussions and the ward. As a ward councillor, can I still continue to do this?
We need to be clear, right? It's different when you're actually just meeting someone in your ward, and if we have the resources to do that, I'm more than happy to send an officer out. But in his active duty or her active duty, members cannot go with them because we cannot unduly influence any process. So you can meet them just as in the seminar, and from your question, you cannot go on the beat with them, as it were. Yeah?
Okay, we can't have any more questions, but perhaps you could pick it up outside the meeting. Okay, Councillor Liz Haynes next.
Thank you. My first question. Armed Forces Day is our opportunity to show support for all the men and women who make up the Armed Forces community, whether they be currently serving troops, service families, veterans or cadets, on a more local level to honour our fallen that include Private James Prosser, Corporal Michael Thacker and Private Kyle Adams. Besides the flag-raising ceremony organised by the Council this morning, what other plans do Torfaen Council have for Armed Forces Day this Saturday, the 29th of June?
Thank you, Councillor Haynes, for your question. As you know, we honour all those who have lost their lives from our local communities during Armed Forces Week, but more so on Remembrance Sunday in November. Armed Forces Week is for showing our support to those currently serving, their families, cadets and our veterans. Last Saturday and Sunday, the Royal British Legion held their national event to commemorate Armed Forces Day. This year the event was held in Cross Keys. We organised our flag raising to coincide with Council today, and we support our community council by attending their local events. As Armed Forces champion, I represented this council at the Bronavon Town Council Royal British Legion flag raising event on Monday. I will be attending the Pontypool Cadet Detachment event tonight and the Cumbraen Community Council event tomorrow. I will also be attending an event in Newport with the High Sheriff and Lord Lieutenant on the 1st of July, and a forthcoming event at the National Assembly for the Cross-Party Group on Armed Forces and Cadets. Last month, I attended an event at the Arthur Jenkins Home in Blanavon to honour D-Day veteran Lynn Parry. On July the 14th, the Regimental Museum of the Royal Welsh and Torfaen Museum Trust is celebrating the 100th anniversary of the return of 2nd Battalion, the Monmouthshire Regiment. This will include a service at the Italian Gardens in Pontypool Park and performances by the Regimental Band. This event includes a parade through the park ending at Pontypool Museum, where an exhibition of the events of the First World War will be opened by Pontypool Museum Trust, and you're all invited to attend. In February 2018, we were successful in being awarded the Bronze Award under the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme and quickly progressed to the Silver Award in December 2018. I am now working with the Head of Strategic Human Resources towards the Gold Award in 2020 to show our support to ex-service personnel and their families, reservists and the Cadets Force, and align our values with the Armed Forces Covenant. As Armed Forces Champion, I support all our serving personnel and their families, our cadets and veterans throughout the year, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you, Councillor Haynes, outside of Council, to hear if there's anything that I can do and the Armed Forces Covenant Group can plan for to highlight and honour the fallen soldiers on Remembrance Day.
Supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Jones. I appreciate the offer of a meeting. I would like that to take place. I I suppose my supplementary is that will the council commit to organising or supporting an event to mark the Day More in future years that I am quite happy to be heavily involved in.
Could I discuss that with you outside? Because I need to get officers involved. Thank you very much.
Councillor Haynes, second question.
Thank you. The Cardiff Capital City Region deal is providing headlines in the local press due to a perceived jolly held in March to Cannes in France. Can the leader remind us what the cost of membership is to the council taxpayers of Torfaen?
Okay, thank you for your question, Councillor Haynes. I was not on the visit to MIPIM in France, so I can't comment myself, but those from other councils who did go reported back that it was 4 days of hard work and intensive lobbying for greater investment in Wales and especially in our region. Other regions from around the UK were represented, and I think it's vital that Wales is represented at the largest property investment fair in Europe to try and get some money into our region. Torfaen's contribution in 1819 to the City Deal programme was £61,503. Obviously, the programme as a whole will be looking to invest the £1.2 billion to help regenerate our region and create jobs.
A supplementary question.
I do, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I think I'm aware that you were not there, and my question would be very different if anybody from this council had been attending. I suppose really is what measured outcome or what has been achieved by that visit that we can measure. The report that I read says that there were lots of discussions, etc., but I'd like something a bit more substantive on what this investment would bring into the area from that jolly.
Something I believe the City Deal Cabinet have agreed to explore, looking at future years and what our particular strategy should be. You're quite right, actually, that if we do go along to these events, there should be defined outcomes and objectives from them. This is, I'm not just saying it, it's a very 26,000 delegates from 120 countries go along to MIPIM. So I think it's vital that Wales is represented in some spheres, that we don't get left behind by others. But we must do it in a coordinated way. There's no point us doing it as a city region separately from Cardiff Capital City, separately from the Welsh Government. And similar, we need to demonstrate the value for money for that investment.
Councillor Haynes, your next question.
Thank you. Again, for the leader, will the leader agree to bring a full report to July's full council meeting on the recently published Estyn inspection report that placed Ysgol Gwynthrew in special measures?
Okay, thank you for the question again. Clearly, performance of all of our schools is of paramount importance to all members. I would be happy to ask the Chief Officer, with the agreement of members for education, to prepare a seminar for all members on the performance of schools across the borough, to monitor successes and to discuss what steps are being taken to support the schools in most difficulty. That will give members a chance to debate the issues and to ask questions.
Councillor Haynes, do you have a supplementary?
Then my supplementary is that can the seminar be organised to take into account that there are people that work and that the people on shift work, and 2 p.m. starts are really difficult for some of us?
I'm happy to have a discussion with Councillor Haynes outside of the chamber to see what we can do to make sure that the biggest number of members can make it. Of course, with all meetings, whatever time you adjust them, they're not going to be convenient for everyone, but I'm more than happy to take her point into account.
Okay, Councillor Dave Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. With the news of the immediate resignation this week of the head of Cumbrian High School, will the leader agree to bring a report to July's full council to update members on the impact this will have and of the measures put in place to support staff and children? Can this report also include an update on special measures imposed in December 2018?
Thank you, Councillor Thomas, for the question. As I mentioned in my previous answer to Councillor Haynes, I'll be happy to timetable a seminar in July to update members and to give members the chance to question how we can best contribute to efforts to support the staff and children at Cumbrian High School.
Do you have a supplementary question? Okay then, thank you members. That concludes the members' questions. So we move on to agenda item 21. These are the Cabinet decisions of the 14th of May and the 11th of June. Are there any questions or comments on them? No, in that case, are we happy to note those decisions? Thank you. Okay, and then item 22 is the date and time of the next meeting, so 10 a.m. here on the 23rd of July. Thank you, members. I close the meeting.